Hello, friends. We're back in our podcast for Asking for a Friend. And the whole intention of the podcast was to have conversations between the two of us that would spark, foster, invite conversations between you and your friends. We have been supplied with some questions, somewhat anonymously, under the guise that maybe someone is asking a question for their friend, the hard and difficult stuff. But we did. We wanted to be on record as having conversations about things that we think are important these days, and also conversations that we hope that you'll have with your friends, maybe even acquaintances. So it is the dark of winter right now. This will probably drop in warmer temperatures, but we got talking about romantic love and how the God of the universe feels about this, teaches about this, and maybe how the scriptures talk about it. So maybe my first question to you would be, is romantic love essential? Is it important?
So I think that those are two different questions. Is it important and versus is it essential? I think our culture would say that it's essential that people have romantic love to be fulfilled. And I think from a faith perspective, that's not true. It is essential that we do have close relationships, that we experience intimacy, but that is not always in the case of a romantic relationship. And it is essential that we know and love God. That would be what our faith would say. Now, is it important? Is it something to celebrate? Absolutely. But it's not critical to having a fulfilled, beautiful life.
So that's a bit of a countercultural message and a countercultural approach. And it's difficult for the church always to resist the voice of culture. Comes to the door, and so we adopt this thing. We have to have epic relationships. Best movies out there, the highest selling ones, I'm sure, have a strong romantic piece to it. Highly, I would say, sexualized. This is the way to go. And so you're saying, that's actually not as important as the culture would make it to be.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about the church has sort of communicated this as well, and we've missed the idea that Jesus was single and Paul was single. So these are Jesus is critical, and Paul was so important in our faith, and they lived rich lives as single people. And so I think we need to balance our approach to romantic relationships with that. But what would you say about its importance? Does it seem important at all within our faith?
I think we've lost our way a little bit. I think we've made it more important than we should have. I think we've done so a bit to the detriment of single believers and sort of made them feel like they don't have all the game that they maybe should or could have. So that's a problem. We want to be careful around that. I'm amazed when I read Paul, I think right now of 1 Corinthians 7, where he seems kind of ambivalent about, well, if you're single, stay single. If you're married, stay married. If your spouse, your unbelieving spouse, will stay with you, then stay with them. If they won't stay with you, then let them go. Like there's an ambivalence about it. Not because the Bible doesn't highly prize marriage and really caution us around who we would marry, and give us real direction around that. Though the Bible does say those things, but I think from the time of Jesus on, like you mentioned, the great intimacy, the great nearness is with Jesus, and then it was kind of like. And the community, this unlikely community that was forming around belief in Jesus, which included Jews and Greeks eating at the same table, slaves and their masters, sitting side by side in church, men and women leading alongside each other. There was this new community. And then I think had to make sense whether marriage made sense in that context. Yeah.
I like that.
Well, it's in the Bible.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you this question. What would you say to someone who is single and wants to get married? I'm flipping this question to you.
So I would say that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's worthwhile. I think there's good instruction in the Bible around marriage. I think marriage has the chance to be, well, in my life, it's been a critical, crucial, sometimes merciless, not really, but merciless sort of reminder of my need to be discipled and get closer to Jesus. And I'm not nearly as spectacular as I remember my single self to be. So, that's a good thing. But if a person were to sort of look at marriage as the fulfillment of their being, the completion of who I am, then I would caution them against that. Like I would caution them against a big pile of money being the satisfaction for them as well. How would you respond to that question?
I agree with that. I think when we see people who put kind of the whole weight of their life satisfaction on finding a marriage partner, well, it will almost crush the marriage or crush the other person. It's not a good thing. So I would say for people who are single and who are open to marriage or wanting it, that it's a good time to be intentional about the relationships that you have right now, and because we all need to have close, intimate relationships. And so investing in your friendships, in your relationships with family, in relationships at church, that is a really important thing to do, and not waiting and shifting into neutral, waiting for someone perfect to come along and kind of rescue you or make your life complete or whatever. I guess I would also like to say that it is, I just want to be sensitive to the fact that it's different for someone who is in their 20s, who is single and open to being married and open to being single. And it's different for someone who's in their 40s and had been hoping to be married and they are not right now. And I know that there's a tenderness with that. And I think that we can still support one another in that, and just be reminded that God has you where you are for a purpose. And it's not like you are second rate or still waiting for God to fulfill his purpose through you. I just want to be tender around that one.
We're going to be sensitive to brothers and sisters on this, family members on this, because I think in some ways it feels like we're talking about owning a dragon, which neither of us have. Neither one of us has dragons. Neither one of us have been single through the bulk of our adult lives.
Yeah.
So we want to be sensitive. I wonder if sometimes church is one of the loneliest places you can come, which is such a tragedy, because we both dream that this would be the place you could come, as a single person, as an engaged couple, as a married couple, as a struggling marriage couple. You were going to come to this family, and you would always be loved, and will always be, sort of in each other's kitchens, in each other's lives, cheering for each other. And so we don't give ourselves report cards. I wonder how we would rate ourselves and how
as a church,
and maybe even this particular church does this, because I think for too long we picked up the script, which was marriage is fulfillment and go have babies. And so as you have people who aren't able to get or aren't married, aren't able to find a partner that they'd like to marry, or then not have kids, it's just we recognize
or
the
feel
heartache.
called to be single too. I think that is a thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, and celebrate that. The call to be single thing, at least as I understood it from the scriptures, and you probably have additional insight into it, but it was always around, what is it that God has called me to do? And then does marriage make sense to that or not? And so during Paul's time, he I think expressly said there would be times when this would be a kind of a bad idea.
Yeah.
Don't get married. I wouldn't counsel you, he said, to be like me. Don't be married.
Yeah.
And so you talked about it earlier. I've talked, we entertained that as a possibility. Maybe God wants me to be single. The thing that matters the most is my discipleship to Jesus Christ, my apprenticeship. And marriage may or may not be a vehicle that God uses to that end. Yeah.
So if you have someone who is single and they are open to being married, what advice would you have for them for dating? Let's assume they're Christian.
Someone shows up at my door and says, hey, I think I'm open to it. It isn't the has to happen event in my life, but I'm open to it. What counsel would you go? Because that's the critical one for me. I would say, if this strikes you as the thing you have to have, then I would say, like a pile of money, like owning a Maserati, like whatever else that you have to have, that might be crawling into a place that it doesn't belong to. But say, I'm open to this. So what totally rip off Kathy and Tim Keller's angle. I like this. So I remember Tim Keller teaching this very subject. And what happens for many of us is we walk into a room full of singles and we scope out the room. And if there's 10 women there, I immediately say no to 5, 6, or 7 of them, just basically on what they look like.
Yeah.
And then go sort of set my sights on these 3. And both Tim and Kathy were saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Give all 10 a shot. Go around, introduce yourself, ask questions, find out what they're reading, what they're listening to, what matters most to them. And they wisely were saying physical attraction matters, but it doesn't ultimately matter. And it's something that actually oddly changes, right, as you get older. And so it's just not nearly that important. So I would say you pray about it. Lord Jesus, I'm open to this. And I'm going to go after your kingdom. I'm going to commit myself to being the kind of disciple that I think you've called me to be. And if you want someone in partnership with me, like as a husband and wife, then I'm open to that. And if not, that doesn't change the course of my direction, my life. And I don't want anybody in my life coming in to change the course of my direction as it is after Jesus. There'll be lots of changes and good adjustments to be made. But what would you say? What would be your response? Advice to someone who's going to enter dating?
I agree with what you're saying there. That we can quickly sort of rule people out based on appearance or other things that ultimately don't matter. I was thinking as you were saying that it's also important to realize that they will change over time. And so it's having someone who is, as you were saying, moving in the same direction and at the same speed is so important. One question I have, though, coming out of this is, what would you say about dating apps or online dating?
If I had any experience of them, I would have an opinion. I think maybe the point that we agreed would be worth saying is that we're not opposed to them.
No.
Right? And so these, it's like showing up at a mixer or showing up at Sunday morning or winding up doing line dancing. These are valid things to do in life.
Might have to edit that one out.
Who knows what can happen? So we're okay. But again, just, don't lose track of what you're looking for and who you are. We may or may not have talked to our friend Seth about, how people present on an online app. So if there's elements of deception, like this is who I am, and you're not anything like then you got to ask yourself, what am I doing in this? Right. And so the online piece does sort of allow for that a little bit more, though you can give people a head fake and in person. Yeah. The best thing for us, I think, we would say, be as honest as you can. Yeah. Be as straightforward as you can about where you're at, who you are, who you're not. I think we all suffer under some kind of delusion that we want to be perfect and we want a perfect spouse, neither of which exists. Yeah. I
think it would be sad to see people feeling ashamed of using online dating or dating apps, in that it could cause us to sort of hide and withdraw. Whereas I think when we are dating, it's important that we're talking and we're being open with our friends and the people who love us about what's going on. So I think there has been sometimes in the church, I've picked up on a little bit of shame around that, and I'd rather just see it out in the open and honestly talked about. That was just what I was thinking.
You're asking about advice too. We had agreed or talked about, like, be that person now.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I can't wait to be a husband, and when I'm a husband, then I'll start doing certain things. Yeah. It's like, no, you could do that now. You could adult now. You can get after it. And so, I would say to guys, if we're aiming for a younger set, it's time to pack the video games up. Like, it's time to, largely anyway, be done. It's time to say no to 6 hours of hockey or football or whatever on the weekend and having that gobble up time. It's time to, invest in the kinds of things that adults do, that a husband would do, that a dad would do. Shovel the driveway, invest around the house, scrub stuff, just get after it. I think maybe that's mostly guys that are capable of suspended development or arrested development, however that works. I don't know if there's a female side to this where you say to a woman who is eager to get married but hasn't got that rolling right now, you'd say to them, and be sure to be about these things, or be sure to avoid these sorts of escapes or distractions.
Yeah, I've been trying to think about that. What would women need to be thinking about? And I almost wonder if we're seeing younger women, they're so confident and self-assured. And, there's been a reason that they've needed to be, that maybe it is more about investing in the relationships, in friendships, and being present to those relationships now, because that's the kind of relationship you want to have in the future.
So let's slide this a little bit to married couples, or
sure,
people who are getting into that game, and couples that are engaged. What would you say you've learned is most important about being married, staying married?
Yeah, I often think about the advice that was actually given to my aunt and uncle when they got married, and they're in a cross-cultural marriage, and they've talked about it so often, and it was just this pastor in their life just said, be kind to one another. And they've talked about how important that has been for them navigating a cross-cultural marriage. And I've absorbed that. And when I think about the aspects of my marriage that have been strong and beautiful, I married a very kind man, and he does so many kind things for me. And so his kindness is such a gift, and it strengthens our marriage. So be kind, just be kind. And I can be so quickly self-absorbed and grumpy and grouchy and complaining, and just choosing to be kind is important. I also think it's really important to learn how to laugh together. Like, that's just find ways to laugh together and make that part of life. And then it seems to me that it's easy for us to take our marriages or significant relationships for granted, and they become lower in terms of priority for investing time. And so that would be something that I'm still learning. Like this, I want to spend time with Brad, and whether it's, playing some of his favorite board games, or helping him shovel the driveway in the snowstorm, things like that. It's just spending time together those have been things that I've learned. How about you?
That's rich. No, that's just the time together piece. So right now we're in a snowshoe routine, and we're in shoveling snow.
So much snow.
And so I like to golf.
Yeah.
Colleen didn't like to golf. She didn't golf. And then the last kid left the house, and she said, okay, take me. And she was just coming to get steps.
That's
she hated it. Yeah, it was beautiful.
I love that.
And she slowly got sucked into it. So she'll say, hey, I want to go golfing. And if we go to Florida in a month, or wherever it is, we'll find a beach to walk on. So the together piece is important. I guess you also learn you're unique.
Yeah.
And if you're, you need space in the morning, I just need till 8:30.
Yeah.
And then I'm game on. And that's fair and good too for us. Okay. So I did want to make a point about when we officiate a wedding, there's a couple of lines in there that are kind of potent, and one of them is and live together as those who inherit eternal life. And so there's this sense, you and Brad being married, Colleen and I being married, there's this sense that we were co-heirs with Christ for an eternal kingdom. And so you're brother and sister before your husband and wife. And sometimes the husband and wife thing can feel a little less energized. It can feel less than zesty and zingy and zowie. But the brother and sister thing never changes. And and neither does the husband and wife thing. We just sometimes fall into a wrong-headed romance script, a perpetual romance script. But that I love that line from our wedding service ceremony words. And also the other one is that this marriage will become a demonstration of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Yeah. And so it's just good for me every time I do that. Think about that's what this is supposed to be. Holy Spirit, Jesus, give us, all of the help that we need. Okay, so here's a challenging because anybody listening, or some people listening, will also be facing this challenge. What kind of what would you say to a couple that's considering divorce? Things are really leaking oil, and if they're going to come and ask you for some help, or even they're listening in, what would you say to people who are feeling a little bit like this is run its course, running out of gas?
Okay, I want to hear what you would have to say, but I think maybe just a couple of caveats. One is that if there is a situation of physical abuse, get to safety. That's number one. And I know that sometimes the church, in our concern and high value for marriage, we have sometimes communicated to people, usually especially women, that they need to stay in a place that is unsafe, and that's just not true. So please get out and find help. Also, I would say if there's been infidelity that you're dealing with, you're going to need help to walk through this, and so. You talk to someone who's trusted to navigate this and find ways to set new boundaries and process your own forgiveness, and then from there consider whether restoration is an option. So those are the two caveats. But most of the time, when people are considering divorce, it seems to be because marriage is hard. It's hard because there are conflicts, and those conflicts can just kind of build up and layer, and they become really hard to untangle, right? And there are hurts that can resurface, so there are lots of layers of hurts. And I think, too, that you were mentioning earlier, we have this script of perpetual romance and excitement for marriage, and when that doesn't seem to be unfolding, we think that there's a problem with the marriage. But actually, marriage is meant for everyday life. It is meant to be lived out this way, and so it won't always be exciting. I think that in these times, one of the first things to do is probably to reach out for help, talk to a friend, someone in your small group. But I think, too, one of the things we can do is practice being kind. And so it's amazing how much when our hearts can actually change when we take the discipline to show someone kindness every day, pray for them. That could do a lot to shift the relationship right there. Those are some of my thoughts. What would you say?
Well, so on that, right, we both have sort of worked through points of gratitude. If you've got a temptation towards resentment or complaining spirit, it was like, start the day with 3 things you're grateful for. And so if you gave me that assignment with Colleen, just start the day with 3 things that you're grateful for. If I could think of it in the heat of an argument, remember the 3 things here that, that you are grateful for. So it is an amazing, like I was saying earlier, it's like a magnifying glass on your soul being married to somebody. Because, I think we really Colleen and I had a weenie argument. Mostly it was me. And I can't remember. It was something like a bag of sugar. It was something silly. And it just seemed to get bigger and bigger until at the end you're like, hey, that was I actually think it was bananas that I bought that weren't organic. But the whole thing got this big. And then we realized, man, this is about bananas.
Yeah.
Which we could feed to the dog and then be done with. But dang, if I didn't want to be patted on the back for the 13 things I did get right on the grocery list. And the whole thing just sort of went in mushroom cloud on us.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of humiliating piece of being married. So, Okay, so I think that's exactly right what you said. Like when a person's at risk, and usually it's a woman, physically, emotionally, psychologically, otherwise, then you get to high ground and come find us, come find family members, get safe. And like Colleen and I said, we're just never going to say that word.
Yeah.
It's not available to us.
Yeah.
Oh, so dang it, girl, you're with me for come hell or high water. And so, that's kind of fun because we can kind of look at each other and we know where this is not going to go. And we've been down the road before. There's been inorganic bananas purchased before. And we'll get through it. But it doesn't bring the heat down. Gosh, I wish it would. So the other thing you were saying, divorce happens because it's just marriage is just hard. And I totally agree with that. And I think I read somewhere, and this might be old information because I think I've been using it for 10 or 20 years, but the number one cause for divorce, breakdown in marriages was neglect.
Yeah.
And I'm always shocked when we have soccer parents that were soccer parents with us when the boys were young. And then the last one leaves the house, and a year or two later, they're going different ways. And it's kind of like, hey, who are you?
Yeah.
And we were committed to a program of raising kids. But so, make that investment now, whatever that looks like. You can go for a pretty cheap walk, but prioritize time together. And make these sorts of things. Sometimes I think you mentioned somewhere, this is what our marriage vows are about.
Yeah.
We make these vows, right? For better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, as long as we both shall live to love. And you think, you don't make them for the wedding day when you're both super beautiful and lovely and photogenic. It's year 7, it's year 13. It's when you really go through some tough stuff. And I think, what's the Bonhoeffer quote? It's actually from a letter he wrote, or a sermon he wrote from prison to his niece. But you think that love is going to sustain your marriage. Let marriage sustain your love. And so there's this covenant love that God makes to us and says, I am yours no matter what. And then we go off and make a mess of things, and God says, that hasn't changed. I'm yours no matter what. And so you've said that to Brad. I've said that to Colleen, no matter what. And I already know there's going to be days when that's not going to be super easy. And there's going to be days when it's the most fun thing in the whole world.
It is. Yeah.
So we're going to wrap soon, but I'm interested in your thoughts, final thoughts, stuff we missed.
Well, I like what you said about divorce just not being an option, and it comes out of that covenant that we made at our marriage. I do often think about Ruth Bell Graham's fantastic quote when she was asked if she had ever considered divorce with Billy Graham, and she said, divorce, never. Murder, yes. And so I just think that's just such a real acknowledgement that sometimes you just get to this place where you just wonder what's going on. I think I'm glad for the conversation. I hope that it makes it possible for others to have these kinds of conversations, because it is important. These are significant relationships. We had a conversation about friendship before, and also significant. And I love the idea of more of us actually talking about how we do friendship and how we do these kinds of romantic relationships.
It looks like you have a great marriage.
I think so.
I'm in the middle of mine. It feels great. None of them are perfect.
No.
So would never want to communicate that to anybody. Man, this is perfect, and it just gets better and better. And C.S. Lewis makes a quote like this. There's this longing piece, for all of us, whether we're married or single, there's this longing for this. It's a perfect intimacy. It's the right union. It's the thing we've been hoping was going to happen. We realize now it doesn't happen in marriage. It isn't perfect in human marriage. But the whole script of the Bible is aimed towards this story of a wedding feast. And it's intentional on God's part, a wedding feast, the wedding feast of the Lamb, where Jesus and the church are brought together. There's a great banquet. It's this, he doesn't say it's a family reunion. He says it's a wedding feast. And so I just want to say that longing that you have, that I have, that anybody has, single, married, or otherwise, for that sort of perfect unity to know and to be known, it's coming. And all of this, whether married life or single life, is preparation for that. And God has these pieces in place, and he's moving us together towards this we believe, great event. History has a purpose in our lives, have a meaning. Okay, good. Well,
thank you.
There you go. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again soon.